Hi, I'm Tess and I have my own slow fashion brand called Tessjeanpatterns. Recently I've decided to branch into patterns and some sewing tutorials, and today's video is actually my very first video that I have made, and it is for how to make this lace skirt, which I have called the Andra skirt. So today's tutorial is part one, which is drafting the pattern, and part two, sewing the skirt. It's a full DIY tutorial. You don't need to download or buy any pattern. I'm going to show you how to draft the pattern to your measurements so it fits you, and step by step how to sew the skirt. So before we get started, let's have a look at the equipment we need and suitable fabrics.
You'll need these tools for pattern making and sewing.
You need an iron and an ironing board, and then you need your sewing machine. I'm working on an industrial sewing machine today, but there's my domestic sewer right there. And then you need an overlocker or a serger for finishing off your seam edges as well. This is all that you need today. 3 centimeter wide elastic. I've gone for white because my fabric is white, so if you've got a darker colored fabric, then go for a black elastic. You need sewing thread, and then you need your lace fabric for the mane, and you need some lining fabric.
Let's have a quick look at the pattern and how everything sews together to make the skirt. So on the top layer we have the front yoke and the back yoke, which have a folded down top edge for the elastic waistband. And then sewing to the yokes are the front and back flounces, which are half circles. And then on the side we have a nice simple rectangle pattern piece which creates the side flounces. And then underneath on the lining layer we have a front and back lining with the lace lining flounce sewn around the hem.
Now let's get started on part one, drafting the pattern. Now this skirt that I have made is an Australian New Zealand size 12 based off my waist measurement, but you're going to make this skirt so it fits you. So using your waist measurement, you're going to draft this pattern, and I'm going to provide you with a measurement guide like this, specific to your size, that you can follow along as we draft each pattern piece so that the pattern is in proportion to your size. But don't worry, it is very straightforward. You're going to literally follow the measurements that I have given you as you draft your pattern. So let's measure your front and back waist and find out your size. So using our measuring tape, we are going to drape it around our waist about mid-rise, which is a little bit below your navel, because that is where the skirt is designed to sit. It's not super high waist. So my waist is 78 centimeters. Now next we want to find out what our front measurement is and what our back measurement is, because they are not equal. So normally our front waist is a little bit bigger than the back because we've got this curve in our lower back. So to do that, we are going to align the start of the tape measure with the side seam and whatever you're wearing. So for me it's the skirt, so I'm going to put the start of the tape measure on the side seam, pull it to get my waist of 78, and then I'm going to come around this side and I'm going to see where the side seam hits on the tape measure, which is 40. So my front waist is 40, my back waist is 38, so in total my waist circumference is 78 centimeters.
Now that you have your waist measurements, let's add in fullness for the elastic waistband. So multiply your measurements by 1.5. Now quickly check your new waist circumference, fits easily over your hips, and if not, I suggest increasing your measurement until it feels comfortable around the hips.
So based on your waist measurement, check what size you fall under. Now you may not normally wear that size, and of course clothing sizes are different worldwide and brand specific. So this size is just for reference, so you can draft your skirt pattern proportionally. And here are the measurement guides per size, so screenshot your size or you can download it in the link in the description below, because you'll need this as you follow along in this tutorial. Right, let's draft the pattern. Okay, so the first pattern piece we're going to draft is the yoke front, and we are only going to draft half of it because once we have done this half, we can just fold it and mirror over to make it into a full pattern piece. So we are going to draw in our waistline, our center front, which is the middle, and we are going to draw in our side seams. Using your long ruler, rule a long line. You want to use your set square or your right angle ruler to draw your center front line. We're now going to put in our side seam. If this is 60, then we're just going to work on this, which is going to be 30 from here to here. Divide your front by half, measure from the center front out to find the side seam. We're going to add in our waistband. We want to make sure that this distance and this distance covers the width of the elastic. This is 3 centimeters. We want to make this just a little bit bigger. We're going to make it 3.2. 3.2, mark again, 3.2. This is the same for all sizes. This does not change, this measurement. Now I'm also going to mark down here. When we mirror it, it means that we know that we're folding it correctly and it hasn't skewed. Now we need to find this point. We need to work out this distance. For size 12, it is 13. And the distance from here to here is 14 for size 12. This measurement and this measurement is going to be specific to your size. Center front is 10.5, and then the side seam 9.5. We have put in this point, and this point. Now you're going to use your right angle and you're going to draw out just a little bit on your center front and your side seam. On the side seam, measure out 7 centimeters and put a little dash. It's just a guide. And on the center front, 3 centimeters. That's the same for all sizes. That does not change. Now on this point, we are going to make it into a right angle point. So using your right angle ruler. Now from this guide point, we are going to draw a nice curve from here. We're going to draw a nice curve into this point, and the same from here to this point. So that is your yoke front. Go ahead and add your seam allowances. I'm going to add on 1 centimeter. Go ahead and add your seam allowance all the way to the other side. I also want to mark in this side seam on the other side. The reason we're doing this is so when we fold it, we can fold it accurately. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to measure this curve and we need to measure this curve, not including the seam allowances. So using your tape measure, align it right on that seam and walk your tape measure along the seam line. This is 13.7. Do this one as well. These measurements have to be pretty accurate because later we're going to draft a pattern piece that's going to fit into this. 18.2. We can cut it out. So we're going to cut out this half first. Now you can fold. Get your corner and you can fold it over so it exactly matches this corner and your side seam, and then you can fold. Just trace around and then cut out the other half. With a pen, label it. So this is yoke front. Cut 1 in your main fabric, whatever that is. The center front is going to be your grain line. So I like to use a red pen to mark my grain. And the next thing is we want to put our notches in. The notches help us later when we sew up our pieces together. I'm going to notch the center front of the yoke, top of the waist, and I'm also going to notch where the skirt's going to fold. We've notched these points to show where the top of the skirt is. So it'll be like this when it's sewn. And that is your yoke front. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do the yoke back, exactly the same method as we've done the yoke front. So this time you're using your back measurement. My back measurement is 57, so half of that, 28.5. Okay, now we want to do this point. This point is different to the front. The front points are actually closer together and on the back they're further apart. So for the size 12, we're going out 16. And the center back is 12.5, 6 seam, and side seam 9.5, same as the front because it has to match. Square out and right angle this point. Put a little guide point, 7 centimeters. We're just going to do 1 centimeter over here on the side seam. Go ahead and add your seam allowances. 28.5. Let's cut this out. We need to measure this back curve and this curve, not including the seam allowances. For the back, we're going to put 2 notches. And the same thing here, we want to mark where the waistband folds over. Draw your grain line, which is the center back. Yoke back, cut 1 main. Okay, these 2 pattern pieces are the hardest pattern pieces to draft, and you have just done them. I just want to show you something really quickly before we carry on. This is how it is sewing together. We are going to be having our side seam match up to check this and to check that you've got a nice curve going over your side. Oh, look, mine's a little bit out actually. So this is a good thing to check. These 2, oh my God, that's bad pattern making. You can see that mine's out by a little bit, so I'm going to check those measurements and adjust it. This is why it pays to always double check your pattern pieces. And let's double check this again. Okay, so that is looking good. There we have it, your yoke front and your yoke back. So the next pattern pieces we're going to make are the flounces. This is the flounce. I don't know why that word kind of cracks me up a little bit. It is a half circle shape. So we're going to use a little bit of math to make this pattern piece. This seam line here is going to sew on this. So to make this pattern piece, we need to know what this total seam measurement is. So we have half, which is 13.7. So total, not including seam allowance, is 27.4. Is from this point to this point. All right, so go ahead and just write that down so you know. All right, this is where the math comes in, because we need to work out what the radius is in order to draw this half circle so that this line fits exactly with this line. So using your measurements, you can follow the calculation. So I've figured mine out already. So the radius equals 27.4 times 2, divide by 6.28. Radius equals 54.8, divide by 6.28. Radius equals 8.7. Use my calculator for that. So the radius is 8.7. Yours will be different because this curve is going to be different for everybody. Mark out from the center point 8.7, and I'm going to go down on the grain line, on the mirror line, 8.7. Have you got a compass? If you've got a compass, fantastic, let's use it. If not, you can just use your ruler. Okay. And I'm actually going to go all the way around this side as well. And you can double check this measurement if you want. You can use your tape measure and you can walk it along the seam line and check that this is the same as this. It might be out by 1 or 2 millimeters just with like drawing a circle. Literally like the tiniest difference can make a huge difference overall, but I wouldn't worry about it. As long as it's kind of like 1 or 2 millimeters either side, it will be fine. And now we want to do the length of our front flounce, which for size 12 is 16 centimeters. Put your ruler on the inner circle and mark out your length. Add in your seam allowances. And then you need to add a seam allowance on here as well. Okay, same as what we did with the yoke. I'm going to mark out this length. Okay, and we are going to label this front flounce, cut 1 in the main. This is your grain line. Cut it out. We want to add in a notch. Just like we have on our front yoke, we have a single notch here to mark a front. We want to also put a notch here, so when we're sewing, we can match these 2 points. We're now going to do the same again for the back. We're going to create a half circle flounce for this seam line. Okay, go ahead and do your back. This time, this measurement is 14.5 for size 12. Refer to your measurement guide to find out what this measurement is for you. 16.8 is from here to here, so in total is 33.6. Draw these lines in. Okay, so using the same formula, because we're doing the half circle. Okay, so the length of the back, go ahead and mark that in. Okay, add on your seam allowances. And cut out. Back flounce, cut one main. Draw our green line in. Now, just like we have our double notches to mark our back pieces, also going to double notch this. To show you what we're going to do next, I'm just going to put these pattern pieces together. We're going to do the side flounce / ruffle. I know it's a square, but it's going to be flouncy when it gets sewn onto this curve. Just to show you very quickly, this is your side seam. This is your front curve going into your back curve. So this is going across the side of your body, this lovely curve. We are going to create this piece here to fit. Back flounce is going to match up here. And the same for the front. Imagine you are going to be walking this around, so it's going to match up. So here is the curve, and we are going to create this rectangle that is going to fit in here. So we're going to take note of this measurement, this measurement, this measurement, and this measurement, and we're going to put it into a rectangle. This part matches here. This part matches this curve, the back curve of the yoke here, and then the back of the flounce here. So let's go ahead and draft this piece. Okay, so the first thing we're going to write down are our measurements. So start on your back flounce. Write down this measurement, not including the seam allowances, 5. Next, write down this measurement, not including seam allowances, 5. Write down what this measurement is, and then this measurement. Okay, 14.5, 14.5, 18.2, and 16 is going to be the curve. It's going to be the straight of your flounce. Let's draw this in. Okay, using your right angle, start down on the left side. Let's start with our first measurement, which is 14.5. Another 14.5. 18.2, and then 16. Okay, let's go ahead and label this just so we know. So we have the length of the back flounce, back side yoke, the front side yoke, the length of the front flounce. Okay, so next we're going to get the length of the side flounce. For a size 12 is 16.5. Check your measurement guide. Draw your line. Now this line is your lace edge. So there's no hem on here. You're just going to have your raw lace edge. I like to just draw that in so I know. And I'm also going to write lace edge. This side and this side, these are your hems. So add on your hem allowance. So we've just been adding a centimetre onto our hems. We add on a centimetre, and then we need to add on our seam allowance across the top because that will sew onto that nice curve Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to put our grain line in, and instead of the grain line being this way, the grain line is actually going to go down the length of the pattern. We want to make sure that this line is our grain. Let's label this so it is side flounce. Cut 1 pair in main. Let's cut this out and then we're going to add the notches. Even though this is going to be a lace edge, just cut along the straight line. Okay, now we want to add in our notches. So single notch for the front, single notch for the side seam, and then we are going to add in a double notch because this is the back. Because this is a cut a pair, it means when you lay it on your fabric, you're going to cut one like this, and then you're going to flip it over and you're going to cut one like this. So go ahead and draw your grain line on the other side of your pattern piece as well. We have done most of the tricky pattern making. All that's left now is to do the lining pieces. There are 3 rectangle pieces to make, and they are going to be our lining. Okay, next we are going to do our front lining. It is going to be exactly the same as your yoke front. It's going to be the same width. Also, this length here is going to be exactly the same. So if you imagine it, because it's lining, so it's sitting under your main, is going to be like this. So the same thing is at the top edge of your waist is going to fold over like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this pattern piece. I'm going to draw this line first. Draw in your center front. We want to add in our waistband. So 3.2, 3.2, and 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, my yoke front is 10.5 from here to here. So whatever yours measures, you want to do that exact measurement. Let's get the front. So 30, 30, total 60. Seam allowance on your side seams. You need to add seam allowance across the bottom because we're going to be sewing a nice lace trim onto the bottom of this lining piece. So let's just double check. Lay this on top. This is the same as this. Okay, perfect. Draw in our grain line, which is on the center front. And then we're going to label this front lining, cut 1, except not in main. We're going to cut it in lining. So I like to write my word in a different color just so I can see it when I'm laying out my pattern pieces and I don't accidentally cut this in the main. So we're going to cut this out now, and then we're going to add in our notches. We want to add in the notches just the same as on the front yoke. We want to notch the center front, and we want to notch where the waistband's going to fold over. Okay, let's go ahead and make the back lining. Just like this is your front lining, I'm going to add in my channels for my waistband. So we want to make sure that the length of our back lining is going to be exactly the same as the front. So we know that we put on the front 10.5. So whatever you have made your front, because again, this measurement is specific to your size, you're going to do it for the back as well. So your front and your back lining pieces are going to be almost identical except in the width. Your front is going to marry up with your front yoke. Back lining is going to marry up with your yoke back. So my yoke back 1/2 is 28.5. Seam allowance. Make sure that it is the same. You want to add on your seam allowance. Okay, so the front and the back are exactly the same. The only difference is the width. And draw in our grain line down the center back. Let's label the pattern piece, so back lining. Cut 1, lining. We're going to cut this out, and then we're going to add our notches. Add in your double notches because it's a back pattern piece. And you can just add in a single notch to mark where your waistband folds over. Okay, there we have it, front lining and our back lining. Like this, and then like this. This is the very last pattern piece we're gonna make. So it is the lining flounce. It's the piece that goes onto the bottom of the lining. And this is a really, really long piece. So let me just show you so I can get it in the camera frame. It's this long. It only has one seam, and that seam is on the center back. So it's gonna be like this. And the reason it's so long and I haven't put in side seams in this piece is because this is like the lace edge that's on the very bottom of the skirt, and I didn't want to put side seams in and kind of mess with the curve of the lace, because everyone's scallops and like lace curves are going to be different. So it's kind of easier if you just do one big long piece, and then all you have to worry about is getting a nice scallop, or you can match the design of the lace down the center back seam, and you don't have to do it twice like on the side seams, if that makes sense. This is super long, but we're just going to work on half and then we can mirror it. So the center front is going to sew on like this, and then this is your side seam of your lining like this. So we're going to have a seam down our center back. Okay, so you don't have a seam on your center back of your lining, you have your seams on your side seams. So that's why this piece is super long, but all we have to do is basically make a piece that is the same width as your half front and your half back. So let's draw this massive, massive line, which is your total circumference. So it is going to be your front and your back. It's going to work on half, so let's go ahead and draw in our center front. With your front lining pattern piece as reference, you know what your measurements are. Mine's 30 and 30. Mark out your front. 30, 30. We know that this is our side seam. So then we want to be adding in our back. Just half of your back. 20, what was it? 28.5. I'm adding in my seam allowance is 1 centimeter. I'm also going to add in my seam allowance across the top. Mark out 28.5 on this side. Add on seam allowance. Center back, side seam, center front, side seam, and center back. So the length of this pattern piece is 21.5 for a size 12. So refer to your measurement guide, because this is a measurement that is going to be different depending what size you are. This line is your hem, and there is no seam allowance because it is your lace hem. So it is going to have a nice scallop or like whatever design it is, but you do not need to add on a hem allowance because it's already finished. Cut this massive pattern piece out. So your grain line is going to run down this way, just the same as your side flounce, because you've got the lace running along this edge. The lace runs down your selvage, down the grain line, so we also need to make sure that we add in the correct grain line. Add in our notches. So we're just going to notch the side that has your seam allowance on. So we're going to notch the center front, and we're going to notch the side seams. We don't need to notch the center back because you're going to have a seam there. Okay, and to finish off, this is nearly done, guys. We are going to label it lining flounce. This one is not cut in lining, even though it's labeled as lining flounce, because it shows at the bottom of your skirt. So this is just going to be cut one in the main. And that's it. You have drafted your skirt pattern. Next, we're going to cut this out and then we're going to sew it. Let's go to part 2, sewing the skirt. So I have laid my fabric out on the table, and I've used the straight edge of the table to make sure that the straight edge of the lace aligns. So this is the grain line as well, going up this way. I have laid this out single layer, and the reason I like to cut single layer is because it utilizes the fabric better, so it minimizes fabric waste. And especially with lace, that you can look at the whole fabric and you can see if there's any fabric flaws or there's any marks that you want to avoid when laying out your pattern pieces. So on your pattern pieces, you have your grain line. So you want to make sure that your grain line is aligned with your straight edge or your selvage of your fabric. So for me, I need to measure the grain line to the edge of the table and make sure that it is straight with that. So with your lining flounce, this is that massive pattern piece we made. You want to make sure that the center of this pattern piece, which is your center front, is in the middle of your edge design. So whatever pattern that you've got going on along the edge of your fabric, you want to find the middle of that pattern and you want to align the center front with the middle of the pattern. And that just means that when you come to your center back, they're gonna be finishing in exactly the same spot either side. So you can see here, it's finishing about here on the pattern. And if we look to the other side, it's going to be exactly the same, finishing about there. And then the edge of your lace trim should just touch the edge of your pattern piece. So this is a layout of the skirt. This pattern piece is cut one pair. So normally I would trace this out and then flip it and line it along this edge of the fabric. But as you can see, there's a little fabric flaw. So unfortunately, this is going to end up using a lot of fabric because I'm going to have to cut this piece, the other pair, on the other side of that fabric flaw. And this is the layout of the lining. Okay, you've now cut out your skirt, so I'm just going to rearrange these pieces. I'm going to put my lining pieces and I'm going to put my lining flounce, which is the big long piece on the bottom of the lining. I'm going to put those together with the elastic in a little pile. So that leaves me these pieces. So we're going to start on yoke, front and back, and the flounces, the top layer of the skirt. So with your front and back yokes, sew our flounces on. Go ahead and get your back yoke and your back flounce. Go right sides together, match your center back notches and your edges. And go ahead and do this for your back yoke and your front yoke. We're going to now sew the seam allowance, which is 1 centimeter, around this edge here. So press your seam allowance up into the yoke. With your seam allowance pressed up, go back to the sewing machine, edge stitch the seam. And that just makes it nice and neat, and it makes sure that the seam allowance is always going to be pushed up because it's going to be secured with a stitch line. So right sides together, we're going to align our side seams. Sew down each side 1 centimeter, going to overlock it, press it towards the back, and then edge stitch exactly the same as we did on the yoke and the flounce seam. So this is what the skirt's looking like now. This is the front because you have your single notch, and the back has the double notch. So we have sewn our side seams together and overlocked and edge stitched. You don't have to edge stitch or top stitch if you don't want to. I just like doing it because it keeps it nice and flat. Add on our side flounce. So this is a cut one pair. On the front you have your seam here, then you have your side seam, and then you have your back seam on the back yoke and the back flounce. So on your side flounce you will have your double notch, which will indicate the back. Find that. So we have here, we have the double notch. So the double notch is going to match up with the back seam. So this is the back and this is the front of the skirt and the side seam. So we're going to match up our double notch with the back seam, the single notch in the middle with the side seam, and the single notch for the front seam. right sides together. And now we're going to do 1 centimeter seam all along this edge. For these side flounces, I'm actually finding that the seam allowance wants to go down rather than up, so that is the way I am going to press it. And then go and edge stitch it, just like the rest. So this is the Andra skirt so far. We've done the top layer, and I think it's already looking super cute. So now we need to sew the lining layer, and then we're going to put them together and finish the waistband and put our elastic in. Okay, so the next step, get your back and your front lining, go right sides together, matching our notches for the waistband. Sew our side seams. Okay, so this is the lining. You've now done your side seams, you've overlocked them, you've pressed your seam allowances towards the back. Now get your lining flounce, which is this big long piece, and we want to match our centre back. And we're going to sew down the centre back seam. Once you have sewn your centre back seam, match the centre back with the centre back of your lining. So your double notches on your lining is going to align with the centre back seam of your flounce. Match those, pin together. A little tip when sewing a lightweight and a heavier weight fabric together is try and sew with a lightweight fabric on the bottom, because having it against the feed dog actually helps feed it through a lot easier, rather than sewing with a lightweight fabric on the top. It tends to like pucker and bunch a little bit more. So you can see that it's just gliding through under the machine nicely. We're now going to put these two layers together, so go ahead and get your top layer and match up your notches around the waist. Sew these two layers together. This stitch is just to make sure that the two layers don't come apart. I don't need to go right to the 1 centimeter, just enough so that I can catch the two layers and hold them together. It's basically a basting stitch, like a holding stitch. Make sure that your notches are meeting as well. And next you're going to overlock this edge here so it's nice and neat and not fraying. The next thing we want to do is put a stitch line. Do this just under 4 centimeters. Just put a little pin mark here, about 3.8, so I know this is where I need to stitch from. So we're going to stitch through these two layers together just to hold this top, because later once we've stitched that, then we are going to be folding this to the inside. The stitch line we want to come just to the inside of the top of the waist. So this is where I want to do a holding stitch line. Put a little bit of tape, or you can draw a line, or if you've got one of these magnets, you can use this to guide where the edge of your fabric will lie. So if I want my stitch line to align where this pin is, I'm going to move my guide and I'm just going to pop that right there. So now I know where to stitch. And when you stitch, you want to make sure that these two layers are nice and flat. So I'm just going to run around the top edge. Helps if you kind of pull the two out to the side like this when you're sewing around. On the top edge of your waist, you want to fold it down to the inside about 8 millimeters, just enough so that you are folding the overlocking down. Go all around the top edge and press it. Once you've done that, we're going to fold it again, 3.4. Now the reason we're going 3.4 is because we're going to edge stitch here, so we're going to lose a couple of millimeters, and then we want another couple of millimeters for wiggle room for the elastic. So by the time you have edge stitched and created your casing, then the finished width of your casing should be around 3.2 centimeters. Go around the top and fold it down, pressing, creating your casing. Make sure that your lining is flat as well underneath as you press. Edge stitch our casing down. However, we're going to leave a gap across the center back of about 4 centimeters. So I'm going to put in some pins here so I know not to sew this closed. Starting at this pin, we're going to edge stitch all the way around, and then we're going to stop at this pin, leaving this open. Double check. You want to make sure that you're not sewing smaller than 3 centimeters. So I'm using the edge of my sewing foot as a guide to edge stitch. Next, we're going to cut our elastic for our waistband, but before you go any further, you need to steam your elastic under a high heat, because heat shrinks elastic. So we want to remove any shrinkage to make sure that the measurement is more accurate. Once you've done that, get your piece of elastic. The skirt's been designed as a mid-rise, so it's going to sit just below your navel. So get your elastic, pull it to so that it feels comfortable, not too tight. I'm going to go about here, and you want your ends to overlap 1 centimeter. So with a pin or with a piece of chalk, mark where you're going to cut. I don't like my waists too tight, so I'm going to be cutting off this piece. This is going to overlap 1 centimeter like this. Now I like to always mark which sides are going to get joined together. So I'm going to put a little mark, I'm going to try and put a little mark here, and I'm going to put a little mark on this side of the elastic, so I know that when I put my elastic into the casing that it hasn't twisted. These two are going to join like that, 1 centimeter. Okay, next you want a large safety pin. Thread through the end of your elastic, and we're going to insert the elastic in through this gap in the waist. Feel your elastic as you go and make sure that it doesn't twist. So our ends of our elastic together, so overlap 1 centimeter. Make sure that your markings are correct. And I like to run up and down a couple of times just to make it nice and strong, and then do another row of stitching down here as well. Okay, and then you can pull it, and then make sure that this thickness sits at the center back of your skirt. So I'm just going to kind of wiggle it through towards the center back so it aligns. And now we're going to edge stitch, and we're going to close the casing. And be careful that you don't catch your elastic. Once you've closed your casing, pull it taut and pull around a few times like this. It will evenly distribute the fullness around the elastic. Stretch it out a couple of times, and then this is what it is looking like. So that's the front. So it's looking pretty cute. Optional now, I'm going to go do this, a row of stitching right bang in the middle of my waistband. I want to kind of flatten the fullness a little bit. It's also going to prevent the elastic from twisting. Starting on the center back again. Now for me on my sewing machine, yours might be different. I don't have a line to use for the top edge of the waistband as a guide. So I'm going to use my little trusty magnet, align that there. And if I align the top edge now with my magnet, that's going to be in the middle. You want to pull your elastic tight so that the fabric is flat, and just do sections at a time. All that's left now is we have to do the hems. So it's going to be like this. Nearly finished. Overlock the raw edge that's remaining, and we're going to turn it under 1 centimeter. I'm going to stitch it. Turn the edge under 1 centimeter. If you have these long overlocker tails, you can twist them and fold them in, and then catch them when you sew your hem. Okay, so you've pressed your hem up on the front and the back. 1 centimeter up, we are now going to stitch through, and we're just going to make sure that we are just shy of 1 centimeter so that we are catching our hem allowance on the inside. And that concludes the tutorial today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. And please feel free to share your own creations with me on social media. I look forward to seeing how you have made the Andra skirt your own.